Look with me at that second and third verse. Jonah, the first chapter, beginning there at verse 2 and verse 3. I'm going to be reading from the King James Version, and it is there that you would find these words. It says, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me." But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof, went down into it, to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. The Lord said, "Arise and go to Nineveh." But Jonah rose up and fled to Tarshish. For a few moments tonight, I want to preach on the subject, when your decisions determine your destiny.
Come on.
When your decisions determines your destiny.
All right.
Where does he come from?
Every day in our lives,
Second chapter.
we face decisions. What are we going to eat? What will we have to drink? What are we going to wear? Is that for here or to go? Cash or credit? Listen to the voice or argue with the voice that's within you. Obey God or disobey God. And we sometimes get so caught up in worrying about the wrong thing. And yet the Bible tells us that if we seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all those other things God is calling. But too many of us have placed God on hold. Jonah was called by God to go to Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was a great city. It was an important junction for commercial routes crossing the Tigris, and it occupied a central position on a great highway between the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. Wealth flowed into it from many sources, so that it became one of the greatest of all the regions in the ancient cities. In other words, it was just like Atlanta. Jonah was called by God to arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah put God on hold. He rose, but he rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Anybody here ever been called by God and put God on hold?
Mm-hmm.
The text says in verse 3, but Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and he went down to Joppa, found a ship going to Tarshish, and here's where it gets to me. So he paid the fare, went on board to go with them to Tarshish away from the presence of the Lord. You ever been called by God and had a little money in your pocket and decided you were going to pay your own way? And when you got down there, you found out you paid your own way into a storm. The word of God says the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. And there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. I just stopped by to talk to you for a few moments on the subject, when your decisions determine your destiny. Jonah got on a ship, paid his own way, and went away from the presence of the Lord. Is there anybody who's ever paid your own way into a storm? Mm-hmm. How you ever had a voice telling you to do one thing and you decided to do another and found yourself in a storm? Traveling down I-75, came to 285. A voice tells you to go I-285, stop, but you decide to stay on I-75. Pass I-285 and run into a stalled traffic jam, and it makes you late or miss an important appointment. It's a storm. You decide to go and thing or two, and then when you got back to your desk, you found a pink slip on your desk because you've been downsized. Your position has been eliminated. You got laid off. It was a storm. Come on now. You decided you're going to hold off by buying health insurance and Obamacare, and your child gets deathly ill. That ain't nothing but a storm. When your decision determines your destiny, how have you ever been in a storm? Jonah paid his own way, got on a ship, and paid his way into a storm. Great winds began to blow. The waves began to rise. There was a mighty tempest on the sea. The ship threatened to break up, and the mariners were afraid. There's a crisis on the ship. The mariners began to cry unto their God, small G-O-D. You know you're in trouble when the professionals are in a crisis. The mariners had a decision to make. They were the ones who were professional boat dwellers. They knew the seas. They had been on the seas, and they were afraid. And they had to make a decision. And so they decided to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and was fast asleep. Isn't it amazing how those who get you in trouble seem to be able to sleep while you handling all the stress? I don't know what it is, but when trouble comes, those who got you into trouble are nowhere to be found. Everybody else is trying to work out a solution to the problem, but Jonah is down under the ship, fast asleep. Well, after a while, the captain had enough of this, and he decided to go down into the ship, where he found Jonah sleeping, and he says to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will give a thought to us so that we do not perish." Now, while the captain was below, the mariners on the deck began casting lots, throwing bones. Some call it hoodoo, some voodoo, some witchcraft. I don't know what they did, but whatever they did, the lot fell on Jonah. And so when Jonah came up, the mariners said to Jonah, "Tell us, on whose account this evil has come upon us? What is your occupation? And from whence do you come? What is your country? And of what people are you?" It seems that these questions woke up Jonah. And Jonah began to realize not only who he was, but Jonah began to realize whose he was. It's good to know not only who you are, but it's even more important to understand whose you are. Jonah responded to the mariners and said, "I'm a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." And the mariners became afraid. You see, when you know who you are, and more importantly, when you know whose you are, it'll put fear in the lives of those who are around you. The mariners wanted to know, what is this that you have done? They knew that Jonah was fleeing from the presence of the Lord. And so they said to him, "What shall we do to you so that the sea may quiet down for us?" You see, we forget sometimes that what we do not only affects us, but it affects everybody else who's around us. In other words, when I'm in a storm, you're in a storm. And when you're in a storm, I'm in a storm. But I want you to understand, when your decision determines your destiny, it also puts others in a storm. The mariners wanted to know, what is this that you have done? They knew that Jonah was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, and they wanted to know what it is that they were supposed to do. But as they were talking, the sea began to get worse. And Jonah told them, "Throw me into the sea." But the men decided to row harder. They wanted to row harder. They didn't want to have the blood of Jonah on their hands. So they tried to row harder and harder. And the harder they of their destiny. But when the crew decided to cry unto the Lord, how many know that prayer changes things? The mariners who had prayed earlier to their small God had changed their ways because Jonah had said he served a mighty God, the true and the living God.